talk about modernizing Odoo ELT data workflows. I'm Simon Stappen, one of the managing partners at Much Consulting, and I'm going to talk to you about Odoo BI and especially the ELT workflow. So how do we get our data from Odoo into our data warehouse and to a place we can analyze it? I'm going to start off a little bit why we need additional analytics and why we need an ELT workflow in the first place. I'm going to talk about the tools and how this will work overall, and then I'm going to walk you through specifically step by step how do we do the extracting and loading, how do we do the transformation, and also how do we analyze stuff. And I have a quick example in the end on the pipeline. All right. So, as said, I'm from Much Consulting. We're a German partner originally, but we operate across Europe. We have an office in the UK and in Lisbon as well. And we do mostly ambitious Odoo projects. So we do a project with 3,000 legal entities and a lot of projects with more than 10,000 orders a day. So this is the kind of more technically ambitious stuff that we are into. Before we start and go into the details, you can get the slides on the right-hand side. Just put in your email address. We are not going to use that for anything else. So just if you want to have all the slides afterwards, you can quickly fill out the form. And if you already want to send in your questions for the Q&A later, that's on the other side. You can ask questions already during the talk, so we can have a good discussion in the end. All right. So why do we want to build a BI and data workflow in the first place? If you think about Odoo as an ERP, and we're going to step away a little bit today from this very standard, very common, smaller Odoo project with a few dozen users. If you go to a little bit bigger projects, you're going to see that performance and scalability is a bottleneck at all times. So as you know, the Odoo transactions, so all the real work you do on your Odoo system every day, it's usually quite small, but many update-heavy transactions that though touch very little data, right? So if you update one sale order, you just touch this one sale order. You don't touch all the sale orders in your database. If you do analytics, it's basically the other way around. So you will touch all your sale orders because you want to know what's the average sale order size. So the type of question and the type of operation that runs on your database for BI and for running your Odoo, it's quite fundamentally different in what you need to optimize for and what it needs to do. So what happens on big databases is that the operations get slowed down by the analytics, and at the same time, the analytics often get slowed down by running transactions on the same database. And effectively, if you put both of these loads on the same database, if you have a little bit bigger database, if you have a little bit more load, so we're talking definitely more than 10 gigabytes of Postgres on core tables, and probably more than 100 users and probably quite heavy analytics load, then you're going to really experience bottlenecks on the Odoo side. And one thing that we obviously want to avoid is we want to avoid slowing down our Odoo just to analyze the data at the same time. There is, though, a lot of other reasons why it makes sense, if you have a little bit more complex system. The first of all, it's the Odoo data structure. So if you filter out all the technical many-to-many tables and so on, most systems still have about 500 tables and about 10,000 fields left. It's extremely difficult for most BI teams to get into this and understand it. Like a lot of fields have odd names on the database. Sale order line has about a dozen fields, right, that describe different types of sums and prices with taxes, without taxes. So denormalizing the scheme so it's as flat as possible and changing the structure a little bit can also be very, very helpful, just so it's easy for the BI team to look at the data. The second point is basically for all analytics workflows, even if you use all the Odoo apps that exist, you still have data from other sources. So for example, if you run online advertisement, you're going to have all your advertisement data somewhere. If you have another online shop, you're going to have data there. Maybe if you have big machines that don't bring all their gigabytes of data every day into Odoo, you might have machine data as well. And being able to connect all this data with your core Odoo data can be really important to analyze, for example, marketing efficiency end-to-end, to account like what are the channels in marketing that have the highest return rates in e-commerce. So there's a lot of cases where you really want to have this deeper integration between your different data sources. Third, as you know, especially including Odoo 18, the dashboards and ability to ongoingly analyze data and do predictive analytics in Odoo was very limited. I think now with the new dashboards, actually a lot of the problems are solved. I think it was a really great update in Odoo 19. But if you're still thinking machine learning or more advanced AI use cases that need to have all your data, it's not ideal to get that directly from Odoo. So to connect all these specialized tools, it's always good to use a copy instead of using the live database. And last but not least, and that's a problem, we're a German company originally, so governance, data security and secrecy is very, very important. And this is one more reason we have for not connecting directly to the production database. For example, in Germany, there's like plenty of precedent that you're not allowed to store individual people's salary data in your data warehouse because it's too easy for other people to access it, even though they're not allowed to. So to be able to remove data that's extremely sensitive, for example, payroll data, but also maybe other information and keep only an aggregated copy later is also a very big plus on the governance side. So if we look at all these topics, I think both from a performance and scalability side, which was really the original driver, but also from just how to manage BI, how to connect a lot of different tools, how to integrate your data sources, there's a lot of good reasons to get your Odoo data to a second place outside of the Odoo system itself. And again, I've mentioned it before, but these advanced options, they're really not the right use case for probably 90% of smaller Odoo systems. So really, Odoo Standard offers great options for pivot tables, for reports, if you have an ad hoc query. The spreadsheets, if you need something very custom with a lot of calculations, creating new KPIs, and then obviously the dashboards connected to that. So if you can solve your problem here, do not build advanced BI, right? Please solve it there. We just have to repeat that every single time we present this, just so nobody by accident does that. The second point, if you lead a little bit more, you might know Ninja Dashboards Advanced. It's one of the most common apps we use if we do like a little bit more complicated use cases directly in Odoo. It is definitely, if you need 1-2 small things, a better option than building a full setup that will be very complex and expensive. But again, especially in Ninja Dashboards, where you can inject custom SQL, also has a few security implications and performance implications here. So, you know, it might be a good second step before you need a full setup, but be careful with the risks here. Yeah. Where you will always need it is effectively if you want to bring multiple data sources together, if you want to do advanced analytics. For a lot of the more advanced AI use cases that really want to load all your data many times a day. And obviously also if you are working with a large organization that already has Power BI, Tableau, Data Studio, and wants to bring the Odoo data there, I think for these reasons there's nearly no other way to do it than the ones we're going to present. But as always, that's why we have the big disclaimer. Keep in mind, it's complexity and additional cost. It's going to be additional maintenance. So it really needs to be worth it. And it's not a decision I would take lightly for my clients to implement a more complex setup beyond Odoo Standard. All right, so after we now know why we should do it and why we also shouldn't do it, let's continue and check out the ELT process itself. So basically, if you think about the extract and load part, so extracting basically means getting all the data from Odoo, right? And loading means we're going to load it somewhere where we can start working with it. You have the first very obvious option. It's the full Postgres database backup. This option is especially used if you're on Odoo SH and if you have smaller databases that you can still like pull in one piece, right? And what you can do effectively is you just take your database on Odoo SH. You can take up to 5 a day. So you can make up to 5 backups a day and extract them in the background. And you can move this in your data warehouse. You're going to have a bit of data lag. You load everything every time, which is also a big waste of resources. But if it's a small database, a lot of the databases are 2 or 3 gigabytes as well, right? Then this is a good way to start. Extremely simple, works on every environment, but Odoo Online, and definitely a good place to start. Now, coming to a bit more advanced option, this is effectively if you have more control over your environment, so maybe Odoo SH dedicated, maybe hosting with a partner, maybe self-hosting, it's a real-time replication. This is a standard Postgres feature, so the Postgres database for many versions already is bringing this real-time replication feature. There's many different types of replication. The one you want to look into is logical replication, so-called CDC, which basically allows you to create a real-time copy with Postgres standard tools from one server to the other. So you basically have a real-time copy at all times of your database. The time lag should never be higher than 1 second. So it's really, I mean, it's near real time. It's really, really close. The faster and the bigger your setup is, the more you can optimize this as well. This is obviously critical if you have big databases, right, that we cannot copy multiple times a day in one piece. If you have real-time requirements, for example, you run prediction algorithms for your purchasing, you really would like to have real-time data, I think. And obviously, you need to have some kind of control over your hosting environment. On the standard Odoo SH, you cannot set that up. So you need a little bit more control here. So I think these are the two more database-based options. The CDC replication is my personal favorite, but there's one more option, and it's basically real-time streaming. So the big difference is between replication and streaming is that the streaming version runs on the application layer, not the database layer. So it basically talks to your Odoo application server instead of directly talking to your backend. And what you can do, both with a webhook, but you can also just pull from the outside, is you use the Odoo API or the webhook feature to get data, usually from some kind of middleware provider like Airstream, for example. And you do it over the HTTP layer, and you just ingest it into your data warehouse. This would then allow you, for example, to bring all the data that you want. It's very granular to BigQuery, to Redshift, to Snowflake. But what's really important to keep in mind is you put load on your application layer. It leads to production load, right? Because you're actually doing a lot of things on the database layer, first level. And you only bring the data you want. So in the first two approaches, you always have all the Odoo data. So if you need more stuff, you don't need to add anything. In the third option, you would only stream the data you need. You cannot stream all the things that are happening in Odoo. That would basically double the load on your production system, right? So yeah, I don't think it's the optimal solution, and we should use the power of Postgres. And I think option 2 is for most use cases, if you can, the best option, really. All right, so let's look at the transform side. Again, what does this mean, and what do we do, and why do we do it? Transformation basically just means we want to reformat our data so it's easier and also faster to access in our data warehouse later. Effectively, this means we join all the tables together, and we use very unambiguous naming, so we would rename fields. So for example, 99% of companies, they only care about net amounts, right? So from sale orders, from invoices and so on, you might already leave all the taxes out in the first place because you never report internally on gross numbers. It's very uncommon in my opinion. So this would already be a great way to avoid this confusion, what is gross, what is net, and so on. And at the same time, we merge all the data together, so we avoid joining later to get all our sale order data. We maybe want the product, we want the product category, we want maybe connected delivery orders, connected invoice lines, and we will merge all of this in one very, very long line in the database, which then later allows us to run queries very fast without joining every time we want to connect data, and it's obviously 10 times faster to analyze this. And you can also then connect these flat tables to any BI tool and just do it with clicks in the interface without any SQL and so on. And that's why we really want to do the transformation. I think I've already said all of these things. There's one important point I missed. It's the Odoo upgrades. Every time Odoo upgrades, the data structure changes. So if you don't transform your data in a unified structure, every time Odoo updates, you're going to have a problem because you're going to also have to change all the things you do later in your data pipeline. You maybe have to update your dashboards. And it's an ongoing issue we have with customers with BI setups is that every time we do an update, right, the data changes. If you transform it, you can transform it from the old and the new version in the same way. You can maybe add a field, but all the existing fields remain with the same name, which allows you to basically be secure on your analytics and data pipeline later against any Odoo upgrade. For all of this, we use an open source tool called dbt. You can download it for free on the internet. You can also use it commercially. And we use this basically as the orchestrator to manage all of this. It manages the dependencies between the models. It tracks it. Code-based, we also have all of this tracked in GitHub. So we have versioning for our transformation and all the other things. And I think it's a really great tool. I'm going to show in a minute how this plugs into all of this. And again, what you really want is we have in our standard set about 25 tables. that we really flattened out, that we provide to all of our customers that we do this with, so they don't have to all do the same stuff over and over again. And then you can still extend on it on a client-by-client basis. We're going to see this later. Obviously, the biggest contenders, sale order lines, connecting everything into it, account move lines, so all the accounting data is then effectively connected into this. Also, delivery orders, manufacturing orders, and always on a line basis is the way to flatten things the best, I think. All right, so let's look at this. Again, I'm going to go on the database route. I'm not going to talk more about the streaming option I presented earlier. We have the Postgres database. If we have control over it, we use the CDC replication. If it comes from Odoo SH, you can, if you do some magic stuff on the terminal, you can make sure that your Odoo SH creates 5 production backups a day, which you can extract on the background without going through the interface. And then all of this, you can just load into a Postgres. From here on out, both loading and extracting options are effectively the same. And then we use dbt to convert away from the Odoo schema into a second schema in our data warehouse schema. This allows us to now have 2 schemas in the database. So if we have something in the transformation that we missed, we can still join the Odoo data into it later, right? So we still have all the flexibility with all the data, but we're going to divide the schemas here. And then we can connect, for example, Apache Superset. It's an open source dashboarding tool that we like a lot. It's free, it's open source, and it's really great. But you can also do anything else. You can use an existing data warehouse like Google BigQuery, Snowflake, Amazon Redshift, and Azure Synapses. You can directly connect basically any common BI tool. There's nothing that doesn't connect out of the box to Postgres. It's the first tool that any BI tool connects, basically. So Tableau, Power BI, Google Data Studio, but really anything you might possibly have most likely connects to Postgres. And then you can just connect it directly here with read access rights, right? And you will not have this load later on. To orchestrate this entire process, we use an orchestrator called Dexter. It's also open source. So all of this is basically free. You just need to plug it together like Legos. And Dexter then orchestrates also the extraction, the CDC pipelines, and to update, for example, the data set definition in Power BI. So Power BI also learns when we change the data structure that it changed. Yeah, so this is kind of how we do this. And then a tiny bit more in the details here. Usually we use one Dexter, one dbt repository for our general setup. We then add an additional dbt extension repository for every client. So every client can also bring in their own stuff, but build on our basic flat tables that we have already created from Odoo Standard. So they can, for example, add custom fields that only exist in their database directly on a flat table as well. And then from the timing side, we usually try to do it in real time if we can, but if you're on Odoo SH, we put it on every 4 hours. So we leave out 1 4-hour window at night. That's not so important. Usually between midnight and 4 a.m., not many people want to have the update. So we do it a bit more often during the day, just to have a bit more frequent data in the morning and until late afternoon. Yeah, and then what you can see down here is exactly this Dexter pipeline. It has a cool interface as well, so you can look at your pipelines afterwards. And then you can also add steps here. In this case, we're updating the superset definition of our data structure, but you could also update Google Data Studio or Power BI. So they're always up to date with how your current data warehouse works. And then you can use all your BI tools just by clicking around, right, creating new views completely without SQL and self-service. All right, so this is roughly how this works. I hope this already makes a little bit more sense. And there's 3 things, though, I want you to really take away from this talk today. First of all, a transactional database is never a BI-ready data warehouse at scale. I know the beauty of Odoo is to integrating everything together, but there's a certain amount of data where this is going to get more difficult. Though there is an Odoo 19 update here, Odoo is adding basically a flag for certain operations to actually run on this replica database in Odoo Core. So maybe in Odoo 20 it will be rolled out that actually all the Odoo dashboards work through this kind of replication structure as well. That would be really great. There were a few talks that hinted in this direction the last days. So, you know, maybe Odoo is going to bring exactly this approach closer into its heart. That I would really love that. Secondly, Odoo Standard first. If you have smaller databases, if you have simple use cases, please never build this. And last but not least, there's a lot of paid tools out there to build this kind of data pipeline that are extremely expensive, but this open source setup works very well because Odoo uses only open source components itself. There's no complexity you cannot handle. This is actually quite straightforward to build. So I would really avoid buying a very expensive ETL tool and just set us up with the few open source tools we mentioned. It's all the pieces you need. And yeah, you're going to be open source and happy long term, I hope. 9 seconds, that's great. All right, thank you so much already for your attention. If you have any questions, again, ask here. The slides are there. And I'm happy for a good discussion also after the talk. Thank you so much.
So thank you for your great presentation.
Yeah,
so
if you come and you're on the video.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with the question. Isn't there a repetition of fields when doing this data transformation? How does it scale?
So there is no repetition of fields because we're creating a second database schema in which we load the transformed data, right? From a scalability side, to be honest, both DBT and Dexter were built for a lot larger setups. So I think we're very, very far away from any scaling limits of how this works. And maybe scaling from an organizational side, we automatically actually create a full written documentation as well of all the transformations, explaining all the fields as well, to make it really easy for the BI team to then later analyze it. You can also then upload this documentation in an AI, so you can ask any question about it, how to do that best. Yeah, so also from an organizational side, I would think really segregating the BI and the Odoo operational layer from each other is actually a big plus also in terms of organizational scalability in a way.
And thank you. So for the second question, don't you need Microsoft Fabrics to connect Power BI?
I'm not the biggest Power BI expert, unfortunately, so I won't be able to answer the question directly. It might go through Microsoft Fabrics, actually.
Okay. So there isn't any questions. I think everything was clear. So maybe just to finish, if people still have some questions, where can they find you?
I will be just outside here as long as there's questions. And we also have a booth just at the entrance. There's also good barista coffee for free. Yeah, so you can also find me there in the next days if you have another talk to get to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.